Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. My guest today is fellow Enlifted Coach, among many other talents, Lucas Lowe, the Progress Engineer. Lucas, how are you today?
I'm fantastic.
Tremendous. Great to hear it. Been excited for this interview. Do a little fade out on the music here. Oh, and then it drops right off. Awesome, dude. Where are you calling in from again? I forget where you're currently.
I live in Tucson, Arizona.
Oh, beautiful. Arizona.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah. How long have you been down there for?
Since 2008, I believe is
Okay.
so quite a while. Yeah. People ask, are you from here? And it's like, well, no, but I've been here. At a certain point, you cross over into, yeah, I'm from here.
Right? Yeah,
It's
for
changed.
sure.
It's changed enough in the past 15 years that the city is unrecognizable from where it was 15 years ago. So that makes me local.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. Totally agree. Where are you from? We're like born and raised?
Born and raised in Haley, Idaho, which is a little mountain town about 10 miles from Sun Valley, Idaho, which is a big ski resort, all the celebrities and
No way.
homes. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Do you go back there often, or is it okay? So yeah, cool.
My mom's still there. My sister just moved to Boise, but she's still in Idaho. So we try and make it around a couple times a year and go visit the snow and say, glad I don't live here anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're going back to the desert. Yeah. I just did my first trip down to Sedona last month and landed in Phoenix and did the shuttle up there. I was actually staying in Cottonwood there. It's a beautiful area.
Oh yeah.
I can see the draw for it. Especially Sedona, man, is so beautiful. It reminded me of it's like a real life Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoon with all the mesas and all that. Like, oh, it's quite the place. So yeah, I very much enjoy that. Yeah, dude, let's get into it. So yeah, what do you like to start with, just sort of present moment time? What do you have going on? Yes, the Progress Engineer. I remember we had a really cool connection. We just from reaching out through the Enlifted coaching community. We just had a yak a couple months ago. It was a really good conversation, and a lot came out of it. You have very much an avid reader, so you gave me a few books to check out, and there were those types of books that really affected me positively. So I appreciate that. And thank you for that. But yeah. Tell us what you got going on these days. What's going on with your coaching? What's going on with, just with Lucas these days?
Yeah. Well, so big picture, I have 2 kids, 10 and 12 years old, married. My wife is a powerhouse, like community builder, architect, realtor, real estate investor. And so she's got 2 companies on the rise right now that they're her companies, but we collaborate. And so that's a big piece of my resource going into that. I've got just one-on-one coaching going on, and that's going well. I'm relatively new. I moved away from a career in corporate America, aviation, in September of 2021. So just over a year of actual, trying to build a coaching practice and moving into that and starting to find some success and have some results and get, a steady trail of clients. And then kids in school and after school sports and, just the whole mix of everything. So very busy, very high producing, but doing it in a way that's super fulfilling, that's super aligned with everything that we want to be doing, which is not where we were, I would say, even a year ago. Like, we've always been high producing, high performing, but we've sacrificed a lot to get to that level, thinking, that's kind of the norm, is like, oh, in your younger years, you're supposed to just grind and kill yourself so that you can have this great life later. And I think both of us at the same time, my wife and I, had the similar mindset shift of like, F that noise. I want to live that life today. So really taking a lot of effort to include the family and time for ourselves, as well as build and grow these businesses, and not fall into that trap of like never-ending accounting and books and meetings and paperwork and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are a few different subjects we can go off into there. It's like the whole idea of like the betting on yourself thing. There's a lot of folks that are in that coaching community, specifically in Enlifted. I've noticed that, you know, leaving their jobs and finding that they weren't necessarily fulfilled in what they were previously doing, or perhaps there's elements of it, you know, and then they can carry forward. And I imagine there's the same for you. You know, what was it like for you to make that decision? You know what I mean? Like we were doing aviation. It seems quite interesting. Like I imagine there's some degree of that was very engaging to have gotten into. I guess specifically, let's start with the aviation part. Like, was that something that was like in your family? Was that something that you were curious about as a youngster? Like, how did you get into that? And where was the tipping point where you're like, I don't really like doing this anymore?
Well, it's I mean, long story, but I'll make it short. My dad was a commercial airline pilot all my life. And so, yeah, from a young age, just fascinated by airplanes and aviation. And as I got older, loved traveling, loved airport. You know, I'm one of the few people that when the flight cancels and we're stuck in the airport, I'm like, awesome. So yeah, just always been around it. And, you know, when I was real young, decided like, I'm going to be a pilot like my dad. And after 9/11, so 9/11 happened my first year of college, and I ended up dropping out of college anyway. But the aviation landscape changed a bit, becoming a pilot plus deregulation, and it just kind of became a race to the bottom, and pay wasn't, it used to be this very prestigious, you know, these were white glove, these pilots were looked at as, and then it just became like glorified bus drivers, and it didn't really appeal to me. But I was 18, I had dropped out of college. I was kind of rudderless, not knowing what to do next. And my dad was like, hey, I can get you a job, or at least an interview in Chicago. So big geographical move from Idaho to Chicago, just doing luggage, loading luggage on airplanes. Like $9 an hour was my first pay. And did that in Chicago with the company that he worked for until they went out of business, and planned my transition. We knew they were going under, so I started applying. I got a job back home in Idaho doing the same thing, luggage, and really liked it. It was outdoors. You're with a bunch of dudes. Like, it was a great job, but pay just bottom of the, you know, entry level. And I went home and lived in their basement and did that. And then met a girl who's now my wife. She was moving down to Tucson for school. I saw there was a job with the same company I was with in their maintenance department doing parts procurement. So no training required. It's all just kind of, again, entry. I think I bumped up to $10.25 an hour and did that for a year. Started talking to some of the mechanics that were coming to get these parts and working on these airplanes, and found out there was a school that teaches aviation maintenance right across the airfield. It's 18 months. It was like $7,000. And then I could go instantly triple my pay if I were to get this certificate. So I was like, well, hey, it's the industry I love. It's around airplanes even more so, and very interesting, good pay. So I went down that path and got my license, became a mechanic. Did that for, I mean, I was in the industry total 20 years. My mechanic stint was maybe 15 years, and always progressed, became a crew leader, had a team under me, became an inspector, and was in charge of quality control, moved into a couple different departments, worked my way up, ended up in really high level management. And the thing that drew me to it was airplanes and aviation. And I found that I had a real skill and a love for working with my hands and fixing things. And once you get into, and I kept going after the money and the next promotion and the next promotion, I ended up in the senior level management position, which I love managing people. I also love people. So that part of the job was very fulfilling. It was the, 5 hours a day in meetings and dealing with government oversight and not getting to do what I wanted because of company bureaucracy. And it's a publicly traded company, so stockholders and just the politics and the, and my path was either remove myself from that and go back down the ladder, which didn't feel right. And at the same time, we had just come through COVID. My wife's world had completely blown up. She was in the process of launching a couple companies. I had been traveling like crazy all through COVID, just away from my family. And just, the thought had crossed my mind so many times of like, I don't have to do this. I could pivot. I could go to another job. I could find something closer to home. And it just all crescendoed into this moment of like, you know what? My family is more important. My cap for earning, I'd reached the top and really wasn't, I was going to slowly 2% a year progress, but I was watching my wife incubate these businesses going, that's, there's unlimited money potential there. And I sat around in my office in any free time I had, daydreaming about entrepreneurship and what should I, well, I could start a coffee shop. I could start a bookstore. I could, do all these other things. How cool would that be? But nah, I've got this steady paycheck and I'm going to stick with that. And it kind of all just snowballed and the right moment presented itself. And it was like, okay, take this step.
Yeah. Right. So even with that, like with that, right, situation being presented to you, was there still a degree of whether it's imposter syndrome or, was there some hesitancy or was it very distinctly here's the time?
Well, so the ending the career was sudden. It was that's a whole nother podcast, but it was not, it was a mutual, it wasn't just like, oh, here's my 2 weeks notice. It was escorted out of headquarters type deal.
Gotcha.
And I'm not one, I don't like being told no. I have good ideas and I'm confident in them. And I don't like the way I frame it in my mind, dealing with incompetency. And so that led to some brushing up against the wrong people. And so that ended quickly. And my first choice was, I didn't even know about coaching. That was not even in my bubble of options, but my wife needed help. She was like, hey, I'm the visionary. I can drive these businesses forward. I hate paperwork. I hate marketing. I hate all the accoutrements. And I'm new. There's no money yet. So I need someone to help me with this stuff. And so I was like, perfect. I'm gonna try my chops at marketing or answering, just doing entrepreneur type work where the risk is in her bubble, not mine.
Right.
And so I joined. I hired a coach to teach me marketing, and he happened to be a coach that teaches coaches marketing. And he's a guy I know. He's here in town. I trust him. He's a high level coach. And he was like, yeah, it's marketing for coaches, but it applies across the board. This is how to do organic marketing for whatever your business is. So I was like, cool, I need help. I'm going to give it a shot. And I paid for a package 4 months. And in that time, met so many coaches that were, in my mind, I heard life coach and thought like, that's not a real thing. But I met relationship coaches. I met money coaches. I met sports performance coaches. I met fitness coaches, all these modalities. And what I found they had in common was, one, not only were they just crushing it and making great money and living a lifestyle that appealed to me, but that they weren't, I thought it was like, oh, you have a degree in psychology or your background is couples therapy. And it wasn't the case. It was like a lot of them came from the recovery community, which I had in common with them. And a lot of them just no experience at all, maybe an online certificate or two, and some, just like people kept coming to me for advice and I started to monetize it. And it was like, also very similar to my path. And so through that 4 months, I just made the decision one day of like, yes, I'm going to use this information I'm learning to help wife with her business, but why not throw my hat in the ring here for coaching? Because I believe I'd be good at it. I have a lot to offer.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's a perfect time to pause just where we are right now with your coaching. We'll come back to it. You said the magic word, recovery, right? We're on the recovery podcast here. And I know you have a story of your own as well that you'd like to share. I'd love to give you the opportunity to just give us a little bit of background, your origin story, if you will, relationships with any substances you care to talk about or share. And just how, that side of your journey, we have a little bit of an insight as far as your profession and even some of your family, but let's get a little bit more of your personal origin story, please.
Yeah. So again, going back to Idaho, small town, maybe 5,000 population. There was a couple paths you could take, or, in my mind, there was two roads. There was like the not college, but jocks, sports, and that. And then there was like the cool kids that partied. And I fell in with I was a jock when I was younger, and then I eventually worked my way over into the cool kid category. And there just wasn't a ton of, the town shut down at 8 p.m. There was not a ton of stuff going on for kids to keep them involved, or unless you were playing sports, there really wasn't like a community building or like. And so I partied, drinking, smoking pot, started up in junior high and just fell into that crowd. And I don't know if it's all small towns, but a lot of people I've run into in the recovery community where it's like this small town, it's like there was a different level of partying. It wasn't like, oh, let's take some wine coolers and get tipsy. We were like, let's see how drunk we can get to right before death and then do it again tomorrow. Or let's smoke so much weed, or let's do these drugs to the point of so extreme. And so I did that all through high school. I went to college for one semester, dropped out because selling pot and drinking and partying was a lot more appealing to me than studying and being, in the education world. Moved back home, got in trouble with the law, a couple DUIs, tons of just like underage drinking and charges, and just always on probation, always in trouble in some way or another, making bad choices. And came down to a point where I was in court, and this small town, so same judge since I was 14 years old, getting in trouble, had seen me all the way progress and was just like, you're on the path for prison. Like, we could start, you're 18, we could start sentencing you now. You want to go do 1.5 years in work camp? Like, these are your options, like you're not making progress. And so at that time, my dad was having open heart surgery in Chicago, where he was had a crash pad for his job. And I said, what if I were to leave town? Like, let's get me out of here. A lot of it's just, I've had these same friends since kindergarten, and they're all doing the same thing. And I just happen to be the slow one that gets caught, So let me get out of town. I will transfer my probation. I'll do the AA was court ordered. And so I did. I got sentenced to rehab. I went to a 28-day inpatient rehab, and then immediately skedaddled and left town. And so that was my first real stint of sobriety, 28 days in rehab. Got turned on to AA, kind of liked the vibe, felt, there was some community there, but I was young, I was 18. These were all, in my mind, elderly at the time. And I was like, I got plenty of years till I'm that bad. And I can, I'll give it a little while, I'll stay sober, but I'm not going to, I'm not even 21 yet. Like, I got to legally drink first. So I moved to Chicago. Sobriety lasted about 6 months, and then it just slowly progressed, picked back up, was keeping it in control for a while, have some wild nights here and there, and never really affected, I kept a job the whole time. I had some relationships. Like, I wasn't a, destitute gutter, down and out drunk. I was the kind of guy that was life of the party, and every once in a while I had a few too many and ended up in handcuffs, and that was me. So fast forward, company goes out of business, moved back to Idaho, back with my crowd that I had grown up with. Everything got turned up. There was drugs getting involved, heavier drinking. Now I was legal age, so it wasn't like a weekend thing. It was go anytime I want, get beers. Still, maintained, didn't get in a ton of trouble. Met my now wife, started dating. We moved to Tucson, and just every year from probably 24 to 28. There'd be 2 or 3 big events a year where it got out of hand and I fought, or I passed out in the campus, or I got arrested, or some big thing. I made a scene, I got into a fight, and then I'd say, I'm sorry, I'll dial it back a little. And I'd drink controllably for a couple months, and it would just build back up. And I started noticing that each time one of these events happened, at first they were kind of innocent and like, oh, he passed out, he crashed his bike and passed out in the campus, like, woo, fun. And then it was like, oh, he stole a purse from a girl at the bar and then swung on her boyfriend. And it's like, well, that's a little out of character. And then it was like, oh, he threw a mug through the window of his apartment and, blew up his relationship. And it was like, they started getting progressively worse. And I also started blacking out tons, like just almost every time I drank 3 or 4 beers. And the final straw was drinking cocaine, hard party night at home, went out to the bars late to shut them down. Got turned around at the first bar we went to by the bouncers. They're like, you're too fucked up, and decided I was going to punch my way in. Didn't work. Got thrown down to the ground. They called the police, and I woke up from the blackout in jail, thinking, okay, I just drunk in public or maybe some public nuisance charge or something like that. Found out that I had vial of cocaine in my pocket. So I had a felony drug charge, felony drug possession charge, and then 2 misdemeanors for assault and disturbing the peace, and had no recollection of anything. And so, yeah, I'm like, hey, can I get my phone call? Let me get picked up, and they're like, you're not going anywhere. Like, you have to see a judge. And I was like, a judge? What? And then they read me my charges, and I was like, shit. And my first thought was, how do I make sure my wife doesn't find out? And I had 2 little kids at the time. My daughter was 2, my son was just born. And all I cared about was saving my ass. And like, how do I lie? What story can I tell her? Why didn't I answer my phone tonight? All this, I get bailed out, come to find out she knows. She's already left multiple messages. She's pissed, fired up. She was visiting her mom at the time. And and then I start Googling, like first time cocaine offender, Arizona, typical sentencing. And it was like, they like to make examples of upstanding white young men. And like a year in prison is what's recommended by the prosecutor every time. And a lot of times that's what it gets that. And then maybe some of it reduced. But I was like, so it was prison. It wasn't jail. It was like, you're going to prison. And immediately thought, there goes my kids, there goes my job, my relationship. I've fucking thrown it all away this time. And so again, my brain just automatically hopped from that thought to just suicide. It was like, this is much easier. You've made a big mess. Cleaning it up is years of hard work, and we don't want to do that. So simple way out. And so I had those thoughts, and I called one friend who by coincidence had gotten sober maybe 2 years prior. And it was a good friend, grew up with, kindergarten age, like real solid friends. And my brain, I called him to say goodbye or tell him I was doing this and have some dramatic moment, and he paused. He was like, hey, fine, like do it. He's like, check it out. Go to an AA meeting first. Just go check it out. He's like, one thing they have is a ton of lawyers are drunks, and there's a ton of lawyers at AA meetings. If you can get one of these lawyers to hear your story, like a lot of times they'll represent you pro bono, or they'll do it on the cheap. Like it might not be as bad as you think. So at least go talk to a lawyer in AA. They'll know, they'll understand your story. And I was like, no, I don't think I can. And the more I started thinking about it, it was like, okay, maybe I can go trick one of these lawyers into representing me for free, or giving me the deets on, am I really going to prison or not? And so I ended up in an AA meeting. It was a newcomers meeting on like a Tuesday night, 5:30. They truck a bunch of rehab people in. So it's a lot of withdrawal energy in the room. And I'd been to AA, I'd done the rehab stint, been to AA, wasn't new to me, but I started thumbing through the pamphlets in the waiting room. And there's one that's like, it's like the basic, here, answer these 10 questions to see if you might be an alcoholic. And it had a quote out of the big book that's like, or out of the promises, I think that's like, you know, if we could be radically honest with ourselves and others, we could make these changes. And it just, I don't know what about that statement at that moment, I literally fell to the floor and had a complete emotional breakdown. Like I had been lying to everybody, myself, my wife, my employer, my kids that were too young to know, my mom, my in-laws, just nobody knew how bad it was. People knew I drank and I was the life of the party, but they didn't know that I blacked out all the time. They didn't know that I was doing pills. They didn't know that I liked Coke. They didn't know the half of it, you know? And even myself, I justified it all. It was just like, this is fine. I'm in control. I still have my job, my kid. I'm doing the American dream. I've got the picket fence and the kids and the dogs. And so, yeah, something about that statement, just radical honesty. It shook me right then. And I went into this meeting like bawling, and some, you know, old timer came over and was like, hey, tell me about it. And I fucking just vomited my whole story to him. And the only thing he said was like, hey, keep coming back, come back tomorrow and call me. Just call me. And I was like, oh, okay. And he told me, he shared some kind of his story and was like, the one piece of advice that will get you the farthest is just listen to what these people have to say. And if they offer you advice, take it. Like that's something you've never done. You've been driving this ship your way, and it got you in this room right here. Like in this feeling that you have of just about ready to kill yourself. That's all you. That's you making the calls. You're calling the shots. If someone in here tells you to call them, that's somebody else giving you some instruction. Just do it. And I was like, okay. And I don't want to feel like this anymore. So I drove home, and an hour later, I picked up the phone and I called the guy. And I was like, hey, I'm calling. You told me to call. He's like, oh, cool. Yeah. Hey, how was the rest of your night? You know, like, what are you doing now? Oh, your wife's coming home tomorrow? Like, clean up the house, maybe pull some weeds. Like, you know, she's going to be pissed, but you could soften the blow. And so just got me out of my own head. And I went out with the shovel and the pick and started gardening and cleaning up the yard and just doing some labor and kicking my own ass. And that led to, I think I did 3 years every day religiously, the same AA meeting for 3 years. And that was the moment, you know?
Yeah, man. Thanks for sharing that whole story.
Yeah.
I remember elements of it, obviously, from our first conversation, but it's been a while. And then, you know, it's still, man, what a story it is, you know? So, you know, 3 years of daily meetings, the same daily meeting. You know, and then what has it been since then? Like, so those first 3 years, and since then, like, what are you up to as far as now? Is it something that you are doing the day counting or the year counting at this stage, or are you just feeling that it's sort of beyond that now? Or?
Yeah, I'm so January 19th, I hit 10 years this year.
Hell yeah. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so 3 years was daily maintenance, and just like that was my identity. I made AA who I was, everything about it. I showed up at every volunteer opportunity. I answered phones. I took it into, after the first year, started taking it into the local jail. Just whatever I could do to be around sober people. I spoke their language. I read their books. That was it. I couldn't deviate. And I credit my success to the belief that if I drink or do drugs, I will die or go to prison. Like, those are my only options. I could maybe it'll take 20 years, but that's the end, you know? And that's one thing that stuck with me. But about the 3-year mark, my kids were older. They started needing more, you know, we were doing after school stuff with them. And so I started backing off, and I'd maybe hit 3 meetings a week. And at a certain point, I stopped taking on, I sponsored a lot of people after year 1, 2. I started just anyone I could, getting them in the rooms, and started slowing that down around the 4th year. And then I started, you know, my mother was a librarian. So I grew up also around books and with a deep love for literature and books. And it felt good to be sober, and it felt good reading the types of books that were telling me like, hey, here's how you solve this problem within yourself. And I was like, well, AA is such a small piece of that market, and I started getting into personal development books and just opened my worldview. Just like I would read 3 a month, just at the same time. I'd read one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and one at bedtime, devouring and implementing it. Like, oh my God, this strategy, meditation, yoga, different self-hypnosis, whatever I could to just to keep growing and learning. And it was so amazing. And I would take those learnings and I would share about them, because AA, as you know, is about, sharing your experience, strength, and hope with others. And I started getting some sideways looks. I started getting pulled out, after meetings, and a little bit of reprimanding for like, hey, that's not AA approved literature that you're sharing about in here. Like, we need you to cut that out. And I was like, okay, but it helped me stay sober. Like, is that not the point? And they're like, yeah, great. And you can share that on one-on-one with your buddies, or, but when you share about it in here, like, we're mission driven. We have one set of literature, one set of books we follow. These are the path. This is the 12 steps. Like, do not deviate or you will die. And I felt that, and I've been to so many groups since then that are way more open. Like, the group I was in was some pretty old timers, all 30 plus years, and very devout, straight line AA. But it turned me off. I just got pissed. Again, I don't like being told no. And so I started having a little, I started having a resentment. And I decided that rather than let that resentment foster and lead to my ultimate demise, I would pivot my recovery into kind of multiple modalities. And so I kept a foot in AA, and I would maybe every couple weeks hit a meeting. Some of them, like the ones I really loved, were like 11 step meetings with a little meditation involved, or yoga for sobriety, where there was some 12-step and yoga combined. So I started kind of hitting the fringes of AA community, and then just pouring myself into other personal development modalities. And that's what has served me better. And truly how I believe, like, I can't get stagnant. Once I hit a certain level of, like, I've read all the AA literature. It's great. I don't want to read it again. I want to read something new. And so that's kind of, I still keep a pulse on the community. I still have a lot of friends that I came up with in the community, and I love AA for what it is, and it is the most successful method of recovery by numbers, but it's definitely, I've come to believe that it's not the only way, and that there are many, many amazing ways to get and maintain sobriety without it. So.
Yeah, 100%. And, that's like the whole idea of like this podcast, Beyond Recovery. And you said the exact same phrasing that I put on it. Like, I always have one foot firmly in AA, because it did save my life, and especially in that early sobriety. Before I'd gotten into, sounds like very paralleling as far as, out of AA is where I really started my self-development journey, right? Getting into Wayne Dyer, and I'd love to get into some of the authors that had profound impact on you. But from there, same kind of thing. It's just sort of capped, like, this part of this, my identity wasn't feeling like it wanted to be completely boxed into, like, I'm an alcoholic, some of these labels, right? And I know we're going to get into the power of words and identity and such here. So before we do that, I'm really curious, like, what were some of those early books? And it's funny you mentioned your mom being, because I know that you're like heavy duty into books, which is amazing. And that's, I seem kind of a little bit where you're getting this from your mom, potentially, rubbing against that energy that she had with books and such. What were some of your favorite books or authors that were like, that started you in on this?
Yeah. So I'll give you 3 sort of self-help books that changed that, because all I had been reading for years was AA literature. Literally, I read the big book cover to cover multiple times in a row. I mean, it was my Bible, and 12 and 12 and the daily reflections, and every piece of side literature and article and speech I could listen to was all AA literature. And so I think part of the impact that these first couple books had was not only that they're great books and I highly recommend them, but that it was just something new. Like when you've just been doing the same thing for years and then somebody shows you something new, you're like, what is that? Oh my God. You know, so I had the first one was Carolyn Miss. It's called Anatomy of the Spirit. And I was looking for she compares, I'll just read you the description. Encoded within your body, teaches Carolyn Miss, is an energy system linking you directly to the world's great spiritual traditions and the divine energy that seamlessly connects all life. On Anatomy of the Spirit, Miss surveys our most revered wisdom traditions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Hinduism, and identifies 7 specific levels of spiritual development, the stages of power in life. So that was like, I mean, AA is hardline. These are the steps. These are why they work. This is the path that people took. This was a look at 3 religions that I had very little knowledge about to begin with. And then just talking about life as this energy force rather than God and Christianity or the you know, higher power. It broadened my perspective about religion, but then it went into like what the true purpose of those things was as it relates to energy in your body. So it talked about the chakras, talked about in Judaism the 7 sacraments, I think, and each of these religious systems, like how they play, and then also that like living out of alignment or having some malady within one of those 7 spiritual positions could manifest as physical disease, you know, like heart disease, and all this comes from these your heart chakra like being out of alignment. So that blew me wide open. Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. Again, like a total whoa moment. And then who was the I forget his name, the 4 Agreements.
Oh yeah, like Miguel.
Don
Ruiz. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's an amazing book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
cool.
and they were less than 12 steps, which appealed to me. They weren't this strict, like our way or death. They were just like, here's some easy, practical thing, like be impeccable with your word. Like AA talks a lot about honesty and talks a lot about forgiveness and being true to your word, but it doesn't, like being impeccable with your word when you read that section is so much deeper of just like meaning what you say and saying what you actually want to say rather than what you think people want. So there was a whole shift in everything. And then I read, and I'd read it previously as a kid, and I've continued to read it probably another dozen times, but The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And that's not a personal development book necessarily, but I don't know what happened when I read it this time. It was like profound mind shift of just like, and it tied into The Power of Now and stuff of like, this kid goes on this journey for the treasure and finds out that it was where he spent his first night of the journey is where the treasure actually is. And so it's like, and every time I read it, I get a whole different message, a whole different meaning. I've read it to both my children. It's just, I don't know. It's one of those that I can't, it's like, it's so deeply layered in metaphor and open to translation. And so those were the 3 that really shook me up. And then since then, it's literally, I have a severe problem. My bookshelves are just like sagging and they're stacked on my nightstand and they're shoved under the bed. And I just, anything I can, I listen, like if I'm listening to a podcast and somebody like this throws out 3 recommendations, I'll add them in my cart. And then after there's 20 books in there, I'll just click order. And
are you a audiobook guy as well, or is it have to be the analog book?
I think it's the librarian side. I love feeling paper in my hand. I love the smell of books. I love going into used bookstores and that smell. And and I really love used tattered book. Like if I can tell somebody's read it and like underlined shit and like dog-eared pages like that. So I love that. Audiobooks I do enjoy for driving, but I guess I'm a little scatterbrained when it comes to like, if I was trying to listen to one, I'd have to like lay on the couch and like put blinders on because I'll just start doing other things. And then I'm like, wait, what was that chapter about? Oh, I got to go back.
Gotcha.
So if
That
I'm
makes sense.
captivated in a car where I'm stuck and I have nothing else to do, like, yes.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I want to get into the idea of the coaching practice that you have, like the progress engineer, which I love the name. Just so let's just start with the idea of progress, right? So what is that to you, and like why did you choose that word? I mean, I know both being Enlifted guys, we're very intentional about the words we choose. So what is it about progress that is like, what was your take on it?
Well, so the name came about. I had made the decision to move into the coaching space and test my chops, and I started doing some like little local business networking events. And then just in my family and in our friend groups, people started asking like, what are you doing now? You know, I know you quit your job. And so and I kept stumbling at the words coaching and life coaching. And there's a lot of stigma in my own story of just like, oh, that's a toxic, you know, and I didn't like the word life coach. And I'm healed from that part of my story, but I'd be like, I help in doing some like, it's like coaching, you know, coaching. And I couldn't, and my wife started noticing too. And she's like, are you like hung up? And I was like, yeah, I like, especially with people I knew that I cared about their opinions of me. I was like, I feel really icky saying it, or I feel like I'm getting judged before I even say it. And so one, I decided I want a different name for it. And at the same time, my dryer broke, and I'm not a dryer technician, but I watched a bunch of YouTube videos and I fixed my dryer. I took it all apart. My wife came home from work one day and I had the dryer in pieces on the floor, and I'd been to the parts store and I bought a motherboard and a belt and a new motor and rebuilt this dryer. And she was like, man, you know, and everything, our sprinkler system breaks and I'll go out and fix it. Or, you know, the idea of stopping my life because something gets in the way is so foreign to me. Like but it's not to a lot. What I realized was a lot of people would let that like, well, my dryer's out, my whole week's fucked. I'm just going to be an asshole and I'm not going to like, well, this is the end of the week, or, you know, and I thought my way was normal. Like, oh, you just fix it. You just figure it out and fix it. And that's not true. And she mentioned progress. She's like, I don't, you know, something about our family and every hang up we've had and every challenge we've had, we never miss any progress. Like it never sets us back even hardly a day. You know, our laundry got backed up for one afternoon and then the thing was back on. So I was like, okay, took that in. And then we were sitting kind of brainstorming, like, how can I say the words life coach easier in crowds? Like, and she was like, what if you were some kind of, you know, your background in aviation and solving problems mechanically and fixing airplanes is like this mechanical engineering. Like, how do we play on words with that? And I was like, ooh, I like that. Yeah. I'm a solutioneer, or I'm a, you know, and progress popped into my head, and I was like a progress engineer. And that was it. We were like, yeah, that's awesome. And one, because everyone I say it to is like, what's a progress engineer? And so a lot of marketing gurus are like, don't do that. You want your name to be very simple and understandable, and they know what you do by hearing your title. And it's like, okay, maybe. I like to start the conversation. And a lot of people, like, I kept going to the network marketing things for a while, and my name tag would say the progress engineer, and people, I think, immediately insert the word project engineer, and they're like, whoa, what kind of engineering? And I was like, progress engineering. They're like, what's that? And it's like, well, you know, when you're stuck, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, we engineer a way forward.
Very cool. So when you say that to people, they're like, oh, so like a life coach, do they, okay, which is cool though, right? It's a great icebreaker.
Now it's like, I just use that. Like, they're like, what's a progress engineer? A life coach, a mindset coach. Like, it doesn't, I've gotten over that hurdle of like, you can judge me all you want. I'm helping people and it makes me feel good. So
I get it, man. I had this, I imagine other people have the same thing, but I had the same thing when I transitioned out of my previous career, and I was doing like, yeah, totally like, I do this thing, it's like this song and dance. And it was just such an uncomfortability that came along with it. So I totally relate to that. That makes sense. I also like you have a degree of curiosity around. So first off, there's that. And then I'm looking at your Instagram page right now, and you do this, the Enlifted, sort of boiling it down. And it's like, it has this like, invitation, and there's like a curiosity to it, right? It's like, change your words, change your story, change your life, ask me how. And then there's the booking link. So kudos to you. I mean, there is that mystery, that curiosity, right? So, which I think could very much tie into somebody that wants to know, or somebody that hears those words. And like you say, when you're talking about the AA literature, if you just sometimes if I just read a sentence, it just has an emotional impact. Just those 4 words, the way they're sequenced in a way that I hadn't heard them before, is enough to go, whoa, what is that? What am I reading right now? So there's definitely an element of that to it as well, which is super cool. So I want to circle back to one of the things you said at the very beginning of the interview, and perhaps this will bring it full circle, is, like, living the life that you want to live. And this is such a, an important topic for people in our age group, young families. And I totally relate to what you're talking about as far as this whole idea that, what you're supposed to be doing with your life, and finding myself getting to that stage and realizing that it's not what it was cracked up to be. And it's like, I have these like series of destinations I'm trying to hit. And every time I get to the destination, sure, there's a brief, dopamine hit. And I'm just like, well, what, my brain is just like, what's next? So I that echoed into my coaching. So when I changed careers, I'm glad that I had a work ethic that was established going into my entrepreneur. But I also found that I was like, the work was more fulfilling than my previous career, yes, but I was not enjoying how I was doing it. I loved what I did. I did not love how I was doing it. And this is a recent change that I've been making, small changes and trying different ways of showing up and such. So I'm wondering how, especially in a family dynamic, how that's worked for you guys. And how do you know that is it just a feeling? Like, how do you know that you're like, okay, we're doing this right?
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good question. One thing that popped into my head was a book title.
Cool.
It happens to be a book I'm reading right now, so it's not like I've been embodying this lifestyle, but it maybe gave words to the way I've been trying to live. And it's called Mind Management, Not Time Management. And David Kadavi's the author, and he talks about exactly that, in society, we're taught that time management is the most important thing, and getting the most out of each hour of the day is the path to success, right?
Yeah.
And that leads to working all day, putting in extra hours, giving up time with your kids or your family activities so that you can maximize these productive hours. And his approach is more how to foster the mindset for depending on what you're trying to accomplish. If it's creativity, it's like, how do I get into a creative mindset so that I can go 4 hours hard at creativity and be done with it for the week? And then the same with my administrative work. Like, what is the mindset I need to be in to get the most, to pay my bills and to get my payroll done and do all these steps? Most people try and do everything every day. And like, oh, I'm going to do 20 minutes of creativity and then 15 minutes of administrative work and then an hour and a half of production. His is like, no. There's generate, which is putting out work, writing, producing. There's brainstorming, there's exploring, there's testing the material, there's polishing the material, and then there's administrative work. And that if you switch between them, you lose 20 minutes, an hour, just getting your mind to catch up to I've made this shift from creativity to editing, and you're just losing hours. And so, and he talks about different cultures. There's clock time, which is what 99% of us use. And then there's this idea of event time, where it's like, I'll come over after I feed the cows, let's get a meeting on the books. How about in a few days after lunch, And so there's not this like 3:30. It's just like, it's based around events, and it's hard to do in a society that's run by clocks.
Yeah.
But the philosophy behind it is like, not being pinned down to these, 3:30 on Fridays, I do administrative work. It's like, no, when I when I am done with my creative stuff for the week and I've had a little bit of recovery, then I do my administrative work. So that's what I'm shifting gears into. But from the time I've started until now, what my gauge has really been is my kids, their success at school, their attitudes, our relationship as a family. Like when we sit down and we have family dinner every night, and that's a huge, like, kind of a must have, we like really prioritize making that happen. And just the conversations we have, like when we do get busy and we do end up, like working late and have meetings all the time, and our kids' attention, we start lacking giving them the attention they need. It shows up in the way we communicate as a family. They get more withdrawn. They start acting out in school. They start, talking back in these certain ways or having these cries for attention. And then between my wife and I, we've been prioritizing like walking every morning. And so our communication also. So if it's like, if she's just stressed to the max and doing all this, our communication falls off, and I can tell. And that's when it's like, hey, how can I either help lighten your load, or how can I support you in this, getting through this busy time? And here's what my schedule looks like, so I have some availability if that's going to help. So really just being as malleable as possible, which isn't always easy when you're trying to, start and grow a business. But that's the beauty of working for myself, is that I'm not at, if today my kid wanted to stay home, I would have just called and canceled the podcast,
Yeah.
Or if my wife was stressed and like strapped and like, I can't figure out my day, I need help, it's like, hey, I'm going to have to reschedule the podcast. Because as important as this is to me, my family, and that's my priority right now, is like, I'm doing all of this for them. Like the coaching included is like, that's in service to my building my family the way I wanted to. So it's like, it's weighing each thing out. Like, okay, yeah, I could go make $500, but then my family suffers. Like, what, adding a value to that? Like, I could make a little less money and my family stays up. Like, let's do that.
Sounds a lot like you're rooted or grounded in something that you've agreed to, that being the family thing, right? Is like, that is very much the core. If there's anything that gets a little bit out of alignment, whether it's as potentially as trivial as some of your kids acting out a little bit or whatnot, that's enough for you to go, okay, there's something that we can, that I can do, that I can provide to get that back in alignment. And that's where you have your grounding from. And that is sort of how that's the litmus test, right? Is if everything's running smoothly. And like you say, it's not always easy, but it's dude, that paints a good picture. I'm definitely going to,
even so much as involving them. Like my wife is involved and knows my schedule and what I do. Like, it's not just like, oh, he goes to his job. She knows how I coach and all about Enlifted and all about the different courses I've done. And I'm just as deeply involved in her. So it's like, we can talk about it at great lengths, and I can kind of bounce ideas off of her, and she can bounce ideas off of me, and we help solve each other's problems. And like, and then even the kids now, like my kids know I'm a life coach, and they know when I offer certain advice, like that it's coming from this, not from dad, but from like, hey, I understand on a deeper level outside of being your parent that like, this could be what's going on in your social life, and like, have tried this experiment out, and they love it. And so that really, I don't know, just involving them in our schedules even, and just, they understand that this is how we survive as a family. This is how we're going to meet our goals. This is how we're going to live this great life. So it's not like dad goes to work all the time and he's gone, it's like, dad's doing something amazing that's helping us all, and mom's doing something amazing that's helping us all.
Yeah. You said the magic word there, I think, is involvement, right? Involvement is such a huge word as far as just involvement in life in general, right? It's like you're involved in every aspect of the rest of your family's life and vice versa. And there's that extra level of participation, accountability, honesty, and isn't it great to just like have permission? Isn't it great to just have that, like that energetic ball all moving in the same direction, right? So super cool, man. Really great insight. I really enjoyed talking with you today, and thanks for coming on, sharing your recovery story and just everything else that you have going on. If somebody's looking to reach out to you, what's the easiest way to get a hold of you online?
Social media right now, Facebook, Lucas Lowe, the Progress Engineer, Instagram, Lucas Lowe or Lowe is my app. Working on a website, working on making things a little more structured and official right now, just enjoying word of mouth and super organic, like reach out and stuff. But I love talking to people. If you heard something that resonated, if you want some book recommendations, if you just want to chat, I'm always open. Hit me in the DMs and go from there.
Go from there. Awesome, brother. We'll have you back on again. I really enjoyed this conversation. So thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks. Good talk. See ya.